So, good morning, everybody.
Yes, good morning, sir. Good morning, sir.
Dear Professor, all who have joined this webinar, and principal of the college, and all philosophy family who have joined to listen this webinar on Wittgenstein. It's wonderful to have you all on this platform and get this opportunity to have conversation on a topic on an area in which I have been working since 1990. So Wittgenstein has been close to my heart since so long time. So it's wonderful to speak on Wittgenstein all the time, and it has become routine, in fact. So first of all, I would like to register thanks to Dr. Dalong for inviting me for this lecture. And in this difficult time when we are all facing throughout the world, this COVID-19, that we need to have our mind all the time, reflecting on issues which affect our life, and there could be nothing more relevant than Wittgenstein's views on ethics. This is what I feel, and now I come to my presentation. That is the topic of the webinar is educational ethics in the philosophy of Wittgenstein. So the area is so wide that it is difficult to choose as to what to speak and what not to speak in the case of Wittgenstein, because entire Wittgensteinian writing basically is based on the footing of ethics. But I have chosen something. So let us start our discussion points of our discussion rather, and I would like to begin with the Tractatus, which is the first book of Wittgenstein, and in this book, uh, the point number 6.421, where Wittgenstein says that ethics is transcendental. Uh, this could be taken as a conclusion of his book, that is Tractatus. And about this book, there is one interesting conversation between Wittgenstein and his friend Paul Engelmann. Paul Engelmann basically tried to ask about Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, published in 1921 in German and 1922 as in English translation, that this book is about what? Because there was quite controversy with the Bertrand Russell's translation of Wittgenstein's Tractatus, when Wittgenstein disowned Russell's introduction to his book. So Paul Engelmann basically asked Wittgenstein as to what about this book is. Wittgenstein says that this book is basically about ethics, and contrary to the thinking that this is about logic and language. So why Wittgenstein said this? That Tractatus is about ethics. This has to be seen in the context of his remark in Tractatus 6.4, where Wittgenstein writes that all propositions are of equal value. Now, if all propositions are of equal value, then this book is also uh, is one book which has many propositions. Many propositions in the sense that this Tractatus consists of 7 propositions and subparts of those propositions. So this book is basically about propositions, but then go to 6.421 from 6.4, where Wittgenstein writes that this it is clear that ethics cannot be put into words. Ethics is transcendental, and this basically is to get connected with Paul Engelmann's question to Wittgenstein about Tacitus, and Wittgenstein's reply that Tacitus is about ethics. Now, why does Wittgenstein say like this? When he said that 6.4 that all propositions are of equal value. Basically, this has to be seen in the context of entire Wittgensteinian philosophy, and taking into note that ethics is the prime motto of entire Wittgenstein's writings. So, when we go to his uh, earlier works, that is notebooks 1914 to 16, then we find there are many references on ethics, and then when you go to Tacitus, you'll find very less references on ethics, and when you go to culture and value, you find many references on ethics and religious belief. But out of that, there is one interesting remark in culture and value which need to be taken in stride beforehand, and that is, Wittgenstein says that for me, uh, ethics and religious beliefs basically they converge at the same point. The essence of that statement of Wittgenstein in culture value is that ethics and religious belief they converge at the same point. That means that ethics and religious belief they are to be treated as uh, belonging to the same domain. And in Tacitus, again, we point in the same proposition, that is 6.421. That is, ethics and aesthetics are one and the same. So, this means that ethics, aesthetics, and religious belief, they belong to the same domain. And at this, what is this domain basically? When we think about it as to what is that domain to which they belong, we find that uh, the division between sayeable and showable is pretty significant. So all those things, according to Wittgenstein, which cannot be put into words, they belong to showable, that is unsayable realm, and that all which can be said belong to the world of language. And what is the word of language? This has to be understood in the context of Wittgenstein's first proposition of Tacitus, that is, word consists of facts, is the Wittgensteinian perspective that word consists of facts and not of things. Actually, there is a there is a debate as to why Wittgenstein said that word consists of facts, and there is too much controversy about that. Not to go in that detail because that will take us from ethics to metaphysics, and let us confine ourselves to this distinction between sayable and showable, which makes us understand Wittgensteinian notion of ethics. So, what is the word of facts? According to Wittgenstein, word of facts basically is the is the word which basically could be defined in the terms of language. So, sayable, according to Wittgenstein, the word facts is the word of sayable, and beyond the word of facts, all that which lies beyond the word of facts is showable or unsayable. So, ethics, aesthetics, and religious belief basically they belong to the word beyond the word of facts. And ethics basically is the matter, is the subject matter of showable and not the sayable. That is the word of facts. Because word of facts is something which can be put into words, but ethics cannot be put into words. This has to be seen in the context of the conclusion of Tacitus, that is the last proposition of Tacitus, that is seventh proposition, whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must keep silence. This again has been interpreted in many ways as to what is the meaning of this proposition, whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must keep silence. Somebody says that no, if I have capacity, then why to keep silence? Then there is a perspective that sometimes silence speaks louder than language. And it is from that perspective that we have to understand Wittgenstein's notion of ethics. When Wittgenstein compares the shovel with the iceberg, which basically is invisible. The portion of iceberg which is invisible is the portion of shovel that is the realm of ethics, aesthetics, and religious belief which cannot be put into words. Now, this has to be understood in a pretty significant way that ethics is something which cannot be put into words. Now, if ethics is something which cannot be put into words, then why to talk about ethics? Then that means that we cannot lecture on ethics also. Is it logical to say that that ethics cannot be put into words and we speak hours and hours about that, write books on ethics? So this is something, uh, the logic behind that as to how we can talk about ethics, even though ethics is something which cannot be put into words. It is something which is to be understood throughout the writings of Wittgenstein. It is one of the significant statement on which researches are done. So, the iceberg, which is invisible, is more significant than the iceberg portion of iceberg which is visible. Likewise, the portion of human being which is invisible is more relevant than the portion of human being which is visible. You can see a uh, personality, you can listen him talking, but it is not possible to go inside the human brain and see as to what is happening inside. So, what is the inside? Wittgenstein says is pious, something that lies inner is pious, and never play with that. This is what essence of practical life ethics of Wittgenstein. So, what I feel is that the invisible portion of iceberg, that is ethics, aesthetics, and religious belief, you can add many other things later on, as Wittgenstein said, like propositions of philosophy, like propositions of value, then uh, death, about that we cannot talk about death, that nobody lives to experience death. So death lies beyond the boundaries of this physical, that is factual world. So these are the realms which, according to Wittgenstein, belong to the invisible portion of the iceberg, that is showable, that is unsayable, that has not to be put into words, but that basically is to be appreciated and felt in a some different manner as we experience through this word of facts. Experience through our sense experience is something different from this extraordinary experience, but that for that we need to go into his lecture on ethics, which he delivered in 1929, 17th November. And he was invited to deliver this lecture in Heretics Society in Cambridge. And that is the only piece of lecture which Wittgenstein exclusively gave on ethics. So, the importance of this lecture on ethics cannot be discounted, cannot be less appreciated. And it is the year 1929, as you know, 1929 is the year of when Wittgenstein returned to Cambridge from his exile. I'm not going to into details of biography of Wittgenstein, which I suppose that you all have read, or if you have not read, then you'll all read his biography. Raymond's biography is wonderful, and Raymond is a good friend of mine also. And you will enjoy reading Raymond's biography of Ludwig Wittgenstein, The Duty of Genius. And there you find that Wittgenstein, after participating in the First World War as soldier, and while keeping Bible with his in his pocket of his coat, and he was a soldier in First World War, and then he was basically a prisoner, war prisoner. During those days, he wrote Tractatus, and since it was not getting published, so requested his teacher Bertrand Russell to write introduction to this book, and Bertrand Russell wrote the introduction, and this got published, Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus. But then later on, when Wittgenstein saw his introduction and found that this introduction basically doesn't put Tractatus in proper light, then he disowned this introduction and said that my book is better than this, better not having this introduction than having this introduction, because Bertrand Russell's introduction puts this book in some light which basically is not the standpoint of this book. But then when you read this introduction of Bertrand Russell, you find that, well, this introduction is pretty good. But then you have to appreciate Wittgenstein's statement, that Wittgenstein's standpoint rather, that why Bertrand Russell's introduction doesn't put Tractatus into right perspective. What is ethically wrong in that? So these are the questions that that I'm raising to be researched on later on. But then let us come to 1929 lecture, a lecture on ethics Wittgenstein delivered to the Heretic Society, and there in this lecture, Wittgenstein, you'll find that if you start this lecture, then you'll not, if you start reading this lecture, then you will not stop till you have finished it, because it is so interesting. You know, we all have might have read it several times, but I would like to raise certain points in that. So that is why let us go in detail of that lecture and discuss about what Wittgenstein tried to show us, to us. So Wittgenstein basically begins with G. Moore's definition of ethics, that is, ethics is an inquiry into what is good. So he accepts initially that what G. Moore has said about ethics, that ethics is something which inquires about what is good, what is right, etc. This is what G. Moore has said in his Principia Ethica. But then you go into Moore's writing and find that good is something which is unanalyzable, because according to G. Moore, good is unanalyzable because only that can be analyzable, which can be put into words. But good is something which has no parts, and since it has no part, therefore it cannot be analyzed into other parts. It cannot be analyzed because there are no parts of good, and good is basically a simple notion. So this unanalyzability of good is something which Wittgenstein liked, and as you all know that Wittgenstein was in constant conversation with G. Moore, though he was not so much in constant conversation with his teacher Bertrand Russell. So but this initial standpoint of G. Moore for his lecture on ethics is something Wittgenstein tried to add on. He said that I'm going to add on to this definition of ethics by G. Moore, and then he went on talking about what is basically ethics. So he said that I would like to say that what good is, what right is in the context of word of facts, because as I have said already that word consists of nothing but facts. So he said that good, when you apply to the things in the word of facts, like good chair or good road, then they all can be analyzed in the context of word of facts. Things of the word of facts are something which can help analyze the notion of good, which according to G. Moore, unanalyzable. For example, good chair. This notion of good chair can be analyzed in terms of the chair which which is comfortable if you are there, if you are using that chair, it is comfortable. And good road can be analyzed in terms of a road which is comfortable in driving and reaching to your destination in time. So he said that the unanalyzability of good, if taken in the context of the word of facts, basically disappears. So there is nothing called unanalyzable in the concept of good when applied to the word of facts. And therefore, Moore's definition of ethics as an inquiry into what is good is the beginning point of a lecture on ethics of Wittgenstein, but basically it is not appreciation of Moore's definition of ethics, but it is only a critique of Moore's definition of ethics. So when he moves further, he further adds to this approach, and then he says that, for example, let us understand it further. He says that, for example, if somebody is playing bad tennis, that is, if somebody is not playing tennis in an excellent manner, but he's playing, uh, just playing, and he's not having very good skill to play tennis, uh, then if some visitor says that, well, you are not playing it good, then the player might say that, then that's all right. That means that if the player says that, well, I'm not playing it for play, but I'm playing for my own fun, then the visitor will say, that's all right. But then if somebody has lied to you and you say that you behaved with me very badly, then the person cannot say that, then that's all right. So, then that's all right is something which has different meanings in the context of a factual statement and, and an ethical context. So, ethical context needs ethical understanding, and factual context needs factual understanding. This is what Wittgensteinian perspective is. Now, from this, he goes further that uh, what is uh, what is the understanding of word of facts and what is the understanding of word of ethics. He says that, and this is pretty interesting that he quotes Shakespeare's Hamlet. In Hamlet, there is a statement, and I quote that, nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Wittgenstein comments on this also. He says that one should not understand that what happens in the mind is something good or bad, because good or bad is not something which exists in the world of facts or which exists in the world of mind, but this is something which is beyond this world of facts. So he makes the distinction between relative value of statement, relative statement of value, and absolute statement of value. So what is the relative statement of value? Relative statement of value is the statement which can be analyzed in terms of facts. So when you say that this is right road, this is good road, then everything of this proposition can be analyzed in terms of facts, and there is nothing like valuable here. So everything is analyzed and everything is finished. But absolute statement of ethics, absolute statement, absolute ethical statement is something which cannot be exhausted in factual explanations. This is something is very pretty significant in the case of Wittgenstein, and that is why Wittgenstein says, and I quote, if a man could write a book on ethics, which really was a book on ethics, this book would, with an explosion, destroy all the other books in the world. Our words, used as we use them in science, are vessels capable only of containing and conveying meaning and sense, natural meaning and sense. Ethics, if it is anything, is supernatural, natural, and our words will only express facts. As a teacup will hold a teacup full of water, even if I were to pour out a gallon over it. I said that so far as facts and propositions are concerned, there is only relative value and relative good, right, etc. So, word of facts basically they are having only relative value and relative facts. Relative value means there is no value in absolute sense, but all that can be explained in terms of facts. For example, if you have a friend, then say that he is a good friend. Good friend means what? A friend which can help you in the time of need. A friend indeed. There is a proverb that a good friend is the friend which helps you in need. When you need the person, then the person helps you. Then the person is your friend. Otherwise, he is not your friend. But here, absolutely right road. There is nothing like absolutely right road because here absolutely cannot be explained in terms of facts. That is why absolutely basically is insignificant. That means that when you say that it is a good road, it is sufficient. But when you say it is absolutely good road, so the word absolutely when you put here, that is irrelevant. That basically is something which has got no meaning. And then, according to Wittgenstein, likewise, absolute good, absolute value, they have no meaning at all. And having no meaning is something which is more important in life. That is, nonsense is more important in Wittgenstein in your life than that which has meaning, because meaning basically is limited to the word of facts, and nonsense is something which is beyond the word of facts. So that which is beyond the word of facts, that is the ethical word, and that is more significant for living a wonderful life, meaningful life, for which on that notion of living a meaningful life I'll come in a while. But before that, I would like to reflect on three experiences which according to Wittgenstein are absolute ethical experiences. So these are the three absolute ethical experiences. What are they? Number one, I wonder at the existence of the word. This is the one. Number two, and why this is absolute value ethical statements? Because this cannot be explained in the word of facts. Because this is something which cannot be explained through the facts. I wonder at the existence of word. Basically, we wonder at so many things like wonderful speech, wonderful person, wonderful place, wonderful event. Aha, it's wonderful. We often say to persons with whom you are meeting. But this here, the use of wonder, I wonder at the existence of word, is something meaningless and has got no meaning, and that is why it is something, according to Wittgenstein, is the experience which cannot be put into words, and it is ethical experience. Why it is ethical? Because it cannot be put into words, that is word of facts. And the second is I'm safe, nothing can injure me whatever happens. That is here Wittgenstein, while seeing a drama in German, he uh, got this notion of immortality of soul, that nothing can happen to me. Nothing can happen to me means that I'm not going to die, is the feeling which gives you power. And this power, which is not originated from the word of facts, basically lies beyond the word of facts, according to Wittgenstein, is the experience which may be called as absolute value experience or ethical experience. Now, why this statement then? I am safe, nothing can injure me, whatever happens. So, here, according to Wittgenstein, there is a misuse of language. Why misuse of language? Because here there is a hint that I am absolutely safe. Safe word is sufficient. If you put before safe, absolutely that has got no meaning. So, according to Wittgenstein, this is a misuse of language because language is incapable of explaining all that which cannot be uh, part of word of facts. And wondering you can have on different things, but wondering at the existence of word itself is something which is misuse of language. There is a last feeling, three feelings he has expressed, which are ethical feelings, that is wondering at the existence of the word, and feeling absolutely safe, and third is feeling guilt. So feeling guilt also is something which is not belonging to this word of facts, but feeling guilt is something which belongs to beyond this factual word, because guilt feeling is the feeling originated not from the word of facts, but guilt feeling is something which originates from one's own conviction, one's own confession. Confession has to be part of life, because no human being, so far as one lives in this factual world, is not a perfect human being. You cannot say that the human is perfect, so he cannot commit any mistake. So human being is imperfect human being, and he has to make the confessions as a part of life. Now, beyond these three word of experiences, he says that science cannot explain everything. Science has proved that there are no miracles. For example, when you I'm talking about word of facts, and Wittgenstein is explaining miracles in his lecture on ethics, that miracles, science has proved that there are miracles. That, for example, he says that you among his audience, that suppose if somebody is all of a sudden started having head of lion, then one can say that there are miracles. But then there is no miracle, because if the doctor is called and vivisected, then there will not be miracle, will disappear. But then is it something which basically has disappeared? No, because the feeling of miracle is something which cannot be explained in word of facts. There is something like, if you say that existence of language itself, existence of language itself is a miracle. So the miracle word, so far as the language is concerned, so far as the word of existence of entire word is concerned, so far as the feeling absolutely safe is concerned, so far as the feeling of guilt is concerned, these are the miracles basically. I would say that Wittgenstein has interpreted, and we can deconstruct Wittgenstein's perspective on this. That is the miraculous feeling cannot be explained in terms of actual word. Now, existence of language itself is something miraculous, and which cannot be explained in terms of facts, because you can have miraculous existence explained. For example, superstitions can be explained. Somebody maintains that these are things like, there is a powerful discussion, powerful commentary of Wittgenstein on um, Father James Fraser's Golden Bough, and Father James Fraser's Golden Bough has been very good scientific anthropological study of rites and rituals of tribes in Amazon area, and about that, Wittgenstein has commented about 20-25 pages commentary on remarks on Fraser's Golden Bough, where there are many interesting statements, positions of Wittgenstein. One is that what is called superstition. In that context, I remember that Wittgenstein talks that who is superstitious person, that are Buddhists superstitious, or who is superstitious. Then criticizing Father James Fraser, basically Wittgenstein says that no one was superstitious unless and until it is taken as a fact of science. If it is taken as a fact of ethics or a fact of religious belief, then it has got nothing to do with superstitions. So while examining as to what is superstitious in life, and what is non-superstitious in life, if we adopt Wittgensteinian perspective, then altogether different conclusion we arrive at as compared to when we adopt a scientific approach to superstitions. Now, I would like to come to the last statement of Wittgenstein in his lecture on ethics, and where he says that, and I quote, "My whole tendency, and I believe the tendency of all men who ever tried to write or talk ethics or religion, was to run against the boundaries of language. This running against the walls of our case is perfectly, absolutely hopeless. Ethics, so far as it springs from the desire to say something about the ultimate meaning of life, the absolute good, the absolute valuable, can be no science. What it says does not add to our knowledge in any sense, but it is a document of a tendency in the human mind which I personally cannot help respecting deeply, and I would not for my life ridicule it. So Wittgenstein basically very much uh, careful about what is ethical and what has to be done, what has to be followed, what has to be emulated in life. So there are many anecdotes from Wittgenstein's life, and I will not be able to sum up everything whatever I wanted to say. But I would like to go in brief about certain positions. One book is a wonderful book by my friend Ranjit Chatterjee, and the book name is Wittgenstein and Judaism, which is available in Amazon as well. And that book I have reviewed in Philosophical Investigations. That is a wonderful book, I would say that, on ethics. The wonderful word in about book on ethics is appropriate word, I would say, that one has to go. And then there is a book by Kodbun Sen, Wittgenstein Buddhism. Wittgenstein and Buddhism is a wonderful by Kodbun Sen. Here I have worked on this in this area where Wittgenstein basically uh, supports uh, this notion of Buddhist notion of no universals. That he says that there are no universals, and this has to be seen in the context of Wittgenstein's book Philosophical Investigations, where he is dealing with family resemblance concept, and there are no essences there are no essences basically of various forms of life, but there are only crisscross resemblances. What is a form of life? Form of life is could be taken in brief as a culture. So there are basically many cultures in the world. You go from one part to other part, and if basically in the context of India, you find that uh, there is a proverb, another proverb in Hindi, that if you move from one place to another place, even in distance of very close distance from one village to another village, they will find that there are differences so far as the pronunciation in language and what quality of water is concerned. So, in that context, you find that Wittgenstein basically uh, talks about family resemblance concept as such that there is nothing common among various forms of life, but there is only family resemblance, that is called crisscross resemblance. As you have resemblance in faces of various members of the same family, like brother and sister, they have resemblances in their faces, like somebody's nose is resembling with the other member of the same family, with the nose, with the cheek, with the temple. So like that, you find that resemblances in various parts of faces. Likewise, you find resemblances in cultures in the world. So, but there is no essence, that there is no nothing like universal which is espoused in Nyaya system of Indian philosophy, that there is a universal. So that is a wonderful concept that you can work on that. And then there is a notion that how, according to Wittgenstein, ethical and religious beliefs basically converge at the same point. This is also interesting, and you find that though they converse, then they have their separate domains as well. So there is a family resemblance between ethical propositions and religious propositions, metaphysical propositions, and this is wonderful. Here I remember that metaphysics is very much possible in case of Wittgenstein, though it is not possible in case of logical positivism. And logical positivists for a long time accepted Wittgenstein's Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus as their Magna Carta, and that is also something which can be cited as evidence that Wittgenstein was misunderstood by logical positivists, and they recognizes later on that Wittgenstein did not agree to logical positivistic principles, that is verification theory of meaning, and uh, metaphysical propositions are nonsense in toto. Though Wittgenstein sounds endorsing uh, logical positivistic position so far as these two theories of logical positivism are concerned, but Wittgensteinian ethics is certainly different from logical positivistic ethics, and there is no doubt about it. Though they seem to be having resemblances, that is emotivism of Ayer and other logical positivists. But then we go to ethics, we find that Wittgenstein does not talk only about educational ethics, in the sense that he is not only giving certain theoretical construct about ethical domain, but he is also talking about how to live a life. And about this, when we reflect in notebooks 1914 to 16, we find that there are propositions which basically Wittgenstein has written, and that needs to be understood properly in this context. That is, there are five propositions I would like to mention here, and then I would like to uh, take on questions. Number one, what are the ingredients of meaningful life? So, number one is happy life. Wittgenstein says that we could say that the man is fulfilling the purpose of existence who no longer needs to have any purpose except to live. That is to say, who is happy. So the one who is basically always thinking that this is my target, I have to fulfill it, and then that target gets fulfilled, then he moves to another target, like that. So this is not a life which Wittgenstein recommends. Happy life means that you are not basically hankering for getting something. You are not something that you are always restless about getting something in life. So the one is happy who is basically not doing this thing. And related to this is the second point, that renounce amenities of life. And again I quote Wittgenstein: the only life that is happy is the life that can renounce the amenities of the world. To it, the amenities of the world are so many graces of fate. So you must have courage to say no to certain things which you think that they are going to be hurdle in your pursuit for living happily. So there must be into the word comfort. So all the desires basically they are to be minimized. This is also a Buddhist perspective and Indian perspective, so to say, that let us reflect on what we desire. So reflecting on desire will eventually lead you to a place, to a point where you will realize that now this is the point where I should stop my desires and rather live whatever I have with that comfortably. Now, from this, the third proposition comes, and that is, I quote again Wittgenstein: a mind who is happy must have no fear, not even the fate of face of death. Only a man who lives not in time but in present is happy man. So, not having fear, because having fear is something which makes life unhappy, and fear of death is something which is regarded as the most deadly fear. So, not even having the fear of death, because nobody is basically lives to lives to experience the death. That is why Wittgenstein says that never have fear of death, even. And he says that the man who lives in the present is the man who is a happy man. If you are living in future or you are living in the past, then basically you are not a happy man. So this is the ideal. Everybody lives in future and in the past, not only in the present. Then what to do? Because past, present, and future basically go in the state continuum, state line. So what to do? How to cut future from present and how to cut past from the present? Well, as a human being, if you cannot cut absolutely, at least you can minimize that. You can try to minimize that, and then eventually you'll get better life as compared to your past life when you did not try to cut past and future from the present. So the attempt to cut future and past from the present is an attempt which will make you happy. And in this, as in yoga, also you find that we need to cut fear, we need to live in the present, we need to avoid fears of future, insecurities. Basically, future lives, one who lives in future basically lives in insecurities of life, because nothing is certain in the world of facts. Certainty is something which which is basically an epistemological ideal, but if you try to achieve that ideal in the factual world, there will be nothing but kind of remorse, trouble, then disappointment, then frustration, and then depression. So, what is important is to try to live in the present without any fear. Then the fourth proposition, Wittgenstein would suggest that living as per conscience. What is important according to Wittgenstein? Act according to your conscience. Whatever it may be, live happily. So whatever there inside your inner is something pious. You have to respect that. But then there is a controversy. There could be a debate as to what is conscience, how to live as per conscience, because a person who is not good person might say that it is my conscience which has directed me to commit this say unlawful activity. But then this is not a subjective kind of thing, this is not subjectivity of experience, but this is subjectivity which belongs to showable, and that showable is not something which is something which will lead you to unlawful activities or to subjectivity. Subjectivity in Wittgenstein is basically not the subjectivity where we are dealing with the word of facts. Subjectivity in Wittgenstein is religious subjectivity, is ethical subjectivity, and ipso facto it is legal, very lawful, and Wittgenstein doesn't suggest anything which basically violates the word of showable, that is the word of sayable. And then the last proposition I would like to say here is the proposition which Dr. Dalung also mentioned in his concept note, and that is about suicide. That is, suicide is an elementary sin according to Wittgenstein, and it cannot be permitted. So suicide cannot be permitted. So we are dealing in current world. We are dealing with so many cases of depression and suicide, according to Wittgenstein, that cannot be endorsed. That is sin. That is religious sin. And you are a religious person. If you are a religious person, then you will not commit, never think of even committing suicide. And that is why, and there is a debate in Wittgenstein case, as the interesting debate, in fact, on this proposition of Wittgenstein that I'm not a religious person, but I cannot help seeing every problem from the religious point of view. So the debate between Peter Winch and Norman Malcolm, that is, I'm not a religious person, but I cannot help seeing every problem from religious point of view, is the proposition of Wittgenstein, which basically reflect on the piousness aspect of religious, not religious in the superstitious sense. That is, a person who is religious must live in accordance with all these five propositions I just mentioned, and the person who is religious has concern for others, not concern for himself. There is nothing like self consideration. Rather, it is a selflessness in Wittgenstein which makes him a universal philosopher, a philosopher across all religions. There is no religion in the world which is not respecting Wittgenstein. It is just because Wittgenstein is something, Wittgenstein has given those thoughts which are acceptable across the world. So I think for the time being, I would like to I'd like to conclude my this lecture with this remark that Wittgenstein says that let us be careful about this word, because this is a word where, quote unquote, Wittgenstein, look at human beings, one is poison for the other. Wittgenstein basically is ridiculing that the way we are living in this world. He is saying that definitely the old culture, that is, the old culture is something which is better than the current modern culture, and the critique of modern civilization where there is too much materialism and less of respect for others. So let us for our own future, for the future of our next generations, and for our own comfort, let us be less materialistic and more concerned for others, more concerned with the religious pursuit and religious in two sense of the term. Thank you so much for inviting me to deliver this lecture once again, and I would like to take questions on whatever questions are offered. Thank you so much, Dr. Darlow.
Thank you so much, sir, Professor Pandey. I'm very much thankful for presenting your lecture. Very insightful, thought-provoking, and you have widened up our distinct ethical thoughts. Thank you so much for sparing your valuable time. And now we have not much questions. I would like to invite uh, Everton Ejung to come up on the screen and pose himself his question to Professor Pandey. Everton Ejung, please unmute your mic and pose your question by yourself. As we don't have many questions, I would like to invite you on the screen to post your question if you are here.
Hello, sir.
Ejung.
Hello,
Yes,
sir.
you are audible.
Hello.
Yes, you
Yeah,
are
am I audible?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, yes.
Sir, you have given a wonderful lecture. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
So, since time is very limited, so I'll just ask one question.
Okay.
So my question is like, what were Wittgenstein views on Nietzsche? Is there any views?
Yeah, you find Wittgenstein's culture and value. In culture and value, Wittgenstein also talks about Nietzsche, and
Mm-hmm.
Wittgenstein could be taken in both ways,
All right.
appreciating Nietzsche as well as criticizing Nietzsche. Appreciating in certain sense of the term, where Nietzsche is talking about Buddhism, say,
Mm-hmm.
Nietzsche appreciates Buddhism. So from that
All right.
perspective, you can say that Nietzsche is acceptable to Wittgenstein, but there are certain things in Nietzsche where Nietzsche is very much atheist and very much against the God. That is not acceptable to Wittgenstein, because Wittgenstein is not an atheist person. He is a very theist and rigorous religious person, in the sense which is very could be regarded as true religious person. So, if you are doing a research on Nietzsche and Wittgenstein, that is a very wonderful area where you can interpret in your own ways, taking into account Wittgenstein's book Culture and Value. And there you'll not
Okay,
find
sir.
many references, but you'll find that references which could be taken for and against Nietzsche. Yes.
Okay, sir. Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Hello. Hello. Mr. Abatum.
Yes, yes, yes.
Hello.
I'm done. Actually, I'm done.
Actually, I saw another question which you post in the chat box. Do not
If
hesitate because of the time. We have enough time. And you may please introduce yourself also.
okay, 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 okay. Sure, sure, sure. Yeah. Actually, myself, Mr. Evotong Ezong, a research scholar from Northeastern Hill University, Shillong. Hello.
Okay, wonderful.
So actually, yeah, I'm currently I'm working on Nietzsche. So I just want to know some ethical thoughts from Wittgenstein views.
Yeah, you just please go to Culture and Value, and
All right, all right.
you can mail me also. I can message me also. We'll have discussion on that. That is
Sure, sure, sure.
Wittgenstein's remark on Nietzsche, and not many, but you'll find sufficient. I mean, for something you'll get something about Wittgenstein's view on Nietzsche. Nietzsche is a kind of philosopher who is known for his strong views, and
Hmm, hmm, hmm.
in many ways Nietzsche is appreciated. I also delivered one lecture on Nietzsche's view on Buddhism in Indian Council of Philosophical Research Center in Lucknow, and
Hmm, hmm.
it was organized 2 years back. So I have my lecture also. So you can, if you write to me, I'll send you that. But then in
Hmm,
that
hmm.
context, you'll find Wittgensteinian perspective also, where Wittgenstein is not endorsing Nietzschean atheism in the sense that God is dead. So
Hmm.
the proposition that God is dead would not be acceptable to Wittgenstein in the sense that it doesn't serve any purpose, and
Okay, okay, sir.
from that perspective, that he Wittgenstein is also regarded as closer to Nietzsche from the perspective that Wittgenstein is not endorsing the concept of God as held by various religious traditions, because
Hmm, hmm.
Wittgenstein's concept of God and Wittgenstein's concept of self is something which is distinct and could be applied to across world religions. No,
Hmm, hmm.
so that is why it is something very interesting, and your desire to research on Wittgenstein and Nietzsche is very good, because you'll find that how Nietzsche is differently interpreted in Wittgenstein, and there are certain papers also I have on Wittgenstein and Nietzsche. But then here I think it'll not be relevant to go in all detail that. But then if you need that, then I can have a conversation with you on that point also. I have visited
Thank you,
Nehu.
sir. Thank you.
I have visited Department of Philosophy Nehu several times. Ah, so
Yes, sir.
it's a
Yes, sir.
wonderful place. Nehu is a wonderful place, and maybe
Hmm, 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 hmm.
next time I come there, we'll meet then.
Please, sir. You're most welcome, sir.
Yeah,
So apart from this, I have also heard that you're talking about Bertrand Russell ethics.
yeah,
Bertrand Russell.
yeah, yeah.
So what I read about Russell, like Russell who developed an interest in Moore ethics, in G.E. Moore ethics.
Yeah.
He was influenced first of all in Moore ethics, and again under the influence of George Santayana,
Yeah.
Russell moved from cognitivism to non-cognitivism.
Okay.
Is it true, sir?
Well, Wittgenstein was not impressed with Russellian ethics. because Russell has his own perspective on ethics, and
Mhm.
he never endorsed the basic point of difference between Bertrand Russell and Wittgenstein was Russell's point of view on ethics, and
Okay, okay.
Wittgenstein never endorsed Russell's perspective on ethics. Wittgenstein
Mm-hmm.
is well known and for his ethical strong point of view, which basically is Indian, I would say that Hindu ethics point of view, where Wittgenstein is basically endorsing that desirelessness. Wittgenstein is endorsing that one has to renounce all desires of the world if one to live happily in
Mm,
the present. Sthit Pragya. That is
mm,
Bhagavad Gita says that it's Sthit Pragya. And
Yes, sir.
Moore was his closer friend than Bertrand Russell because Moore used to talk to Wittgenstein. Moore used to visit Wittgenstein in Norway also, where we find that Wittgenstein dictated G. Moore,
Okay, sir.
and these things I suppose that makes Wittgenstein closer to G. Moore as compared to Bertrand Russell. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Okay, thank you, sir. Sir, one more question, sir. I
Yeah.
hope if you don't mind, sir.
Yeah, yeah, most welcome.
So, was Wittgenstein a cultural relativist or moral relativist, or neither both?
I would say that if you say straightforward, then he was not a relativist. Interpreting
Okay.
Wittgenstein as a moral relativist will not be useful because he never talked about that. Moral
Mhm.
relativism is out of the question, you know,
Okay,
because he
okay.
was not a moral relativist. But yes, there could be a debate about the cultural relativist from the perspective when Wittgenstein talks about form of life.
Mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm,
then,
mm-hmm,
since Wittgenstein talks about the concept of family resemblance,
mm-hmm.
so that also is to be ruled out by many people. That many people have ruled out that Wittgenstein was a cultural relativist as well, because Wittgenstein is not giving that notion of form of life as something which is final, and he is tapping that with the notion of family resemblance and endorses that there is a family resemblance among various world cultures. So that is why I suppose that the he was not a cultural relativist as well, because otherwise, if there would not have been this concept of form of life along with family resemblance, then he could be regarded as relativist. But some people who basically consider this language game notion, and they say that, which says that everything has meaning in the every statement has meaning in a particular context, uh, realize that Wittgenstein was a relativist. But this also has been rejected by many Wittgensteinians, that Wittgenstein was not a relativist in the term in which relativism has been interpreted in philosophy. But
Okay, sir.
Wittgenstein was basically not a relativist because he accepted this family resemblance concept, and there is a concept of there is a kind of you can say hint of relativism so far as the language game is concerned. But yes, that has been
Mhm.
overcome by so many paragraphs in PI. Yes.
Okay, sir. Okay. Thank you so much for your good answers, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abatum. And you have made the webinar more lively by putting up these questions. Without questions from my personal understanding, a webinar is not so much fruitful. So your questions are
Mhm.
so much relevant, and our research person presentation is also added much weightage. So I'm very
Yes,
thankful
yes.
to both of you, and all the
Yes,
best
yes.
for your research work.
Okay,
And we
thank
have
you. Uh-huh.
we'll take one more question from Shoyab Ahmed. Last question. Shoyab Ahmed, if you are in this, you please come on the screen. Shoyab Ahmed, introduce yourself and pose your question. Shoyab Ahmed.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Hello.
Sir, myself, Soyamed, I am a medical. Hello, hello, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir. My hello, sir. I am audible, sir.
Yeah,
Hello,
audible, very much audible.
hello. Uh, Sir, myself, Sohail Ahmed. I am a student medical. I am a medical science student. I read in the second year Midnapur Homeopathy Medical College, sir.
Okay.
Sir, my query is that now the world is suffering from COVID-19 pandemic situation. So the middle class family or low class family is suffering so many problems. So my sir, as a doctor, as a physician, how I to tackle or how I told that they mentally strong, sir. This my view.
Oh, that's great. That's a great question, in fact. And I would like to say that this is something very relevant question in the present context, and this has to be seen in the ethics of Wittgenstein. What is Wittgensteinian response to this COVID-19 ethical situation where we are basically locked down and we are living a separated life, and we are living basically in uh, uh, separation from the society and other people, and we are suffering both mental and physical trauma. Trauma of mental is more severe than the physical
Yes, sir.
suffering. So as I said that there are
Yes, sir.
five propositions which
Yes,
I
sir.
just
Yes, sir.
mentioned,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
that is living happily and renounce the amenities of world for the time being, at least in during COVID problem. And then we have to not have fear. And how not to have fear? We have to resolve our routine. Like yoga could be one significant, and other religious practices could be motivational point. Motivational, all motivational points are to be taken into stride, and we need to live as per conscience. We need not think about self, but we need to think about others problems, at least from the perspective of what we can change in the world, at least through not going near the person, but through so many ways that you can help others, like delivering talk, like talking through telephone, like messages. So we
Yes,
have,
sir.
brother,
Yes, sir.
we
Yes,
have
sir.
to we have to live a balanced life. I think doctors are doing wonderful work, but they also need to think about their own life. Life basically
Yes,
has
sir.
changed these in few these months. I think life has changed, and we are basically forced to live a different life, and we need to realize that we have to make a pattern of living which suits to our mental well-being. Our prime minister also have given that this notion that we need to basically think about life which is good for others, which we have to basically, our mental balance is pretty significant. So doctors basically
Okay, sir.
need to reflect on that mental balance is more important. Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, that's very nice. Thank you so much, sir, Professor Pandit, sir.
Thank you.
Uh,